Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about how to study for GAMSAT Section 1. My name's Summer, I'm a tutor at GAMSAT Science and a third year medical student at the University of Sydney. As you can hear from the accent, I grew up in the US and moved to Australia for university. Outside of uni, I really enjoy seeing friends and family and hiking. Here's a picture of my favorite hike from the US growing up. So I sat the GAMSAT during COVID in the middle of my uni exams and felt a little bit like this guy here. It was really not good timing of everything, but it forced me to really figure out a good study plan. So we're going to go through that here. So what is GAMSAT Section 1? Formally, it's called the Reasoning in Humanities and Social Sciences, and it's made up of 62 multi-choice questions on various passages, which may be poetry, fiction, nonfiction, technical texts, graphical texts, or cartoons. Now, you may not get all of these, but you'll get an assortment of some of these within the exam setting. Now, the purpose of this section is to test our understanding of the meaning of a passage and the impact of the context, and also our ability to sift through the unnecessary information that there may be in the passage. So these are important skills in healthcare. They allow us to pick out the key parts of a patient's story to help us treat them, and also to see the bigger picture, so the psychological, social, and biological factors that will influence a patient's recovery. So you'll have 100 minutes to complete the test, and this is broken into 8 minutes reading time and 92 minutes writing. So if we break this down, once the writing time starts, there's about 1.5 minutes per question. So one of the goals with Section 1 should be to get through all of the questions with reasonable confidence. And with any test, it's a good idea to prioritize the passages and questions that are easier for you. So don't just go through the questions one at a time and spend 10 minutes trying to understand one really difficult passage when you could get through 2 easier passages and their associated questions within that same amount of time. So if you prioritize the passages a little bit, once you've gone through the entire test, you can go back to those harder passages or questions and dedicate the rest of your time to those. It's also important to only use the information that's given within the passage. So we all have subconscious biases about things in life, and we may have some outside knowledge about the passage content, but the GAMSAT answer choices are very specific, and the correct choice will only rely on information given to you within the passage. So you have to take it a bit at face value in that way. The process of elimination is a good way to approach the answer choices. So in Section 1, the answer choices can typically be split in On that note, process of elimination is a good way to approach the answer choices. So in Section 1, the answer choices can typically be split into one that is irrelevant to the question or passage, one that's clearly incorrect, and 2 that are both right, but one is more accurate than the other and more relevant to the question than the other choice. So it's helpful to keep this in mind when tossing up between answer choices. Finally, try to leave a few minutes at the end to check your answers. And when you're practicing, always take notes on your mistakes so that you can really learn from these. So we'll go through some more specific strategies based on the passage types. So firstly, we have poetry. Some important things to think about when you're coming across a poetry passage is you want to identify who the speaker is. So and differentiate between the poet and the characters, because the poet may have a different perspective or idea compared to the character that he or she is talking about. So keep that in mind. Another thing to be paying attention to is what the tone and the atmosphere of this poem is. So is it calm? Is it dreary? Is it humorous or sarcastic? Be thinking of some adjectives to describe this as you're reading through the poem. Next thing to consider is what is the main idea of this poem? And then, of course, the use of poetic devices. So symbolism, imagery, similes and metaphors, tension. There are lots of poetic devices that might be used, and oftentimes the questions will ask about these specifically. For prose, so that's your fiction, your nonfiction, your technical texts, a good strategy is to first skim read the passage and focus on the first and the last sentences, because these are going to give you the general context and the main ideas. Next, you can carefully read through the questions and consider whether they're asking for tone, attitude, the meaning, the reaction of the character, whatever the questions might be specifically asking. And then with this in mind, read through the passage fully and try to pick out those answers on this complete read. Now with cartoons, you want to, again, identify the speaker and the tone. You want to identify what is the irony of this cartoon. So what is it that makes a cartoon humorous? Notice any use of labels, exaggerations, angles, face expressions, symbolism. All of these factors may be adding to the humor of the cartoon. And then, of course, again, you want to consider what's the main idea of this cartoon here. What is it really saying? Now, it's important to start preparing for GAMSAT Section 1 early in order to minimize your stress as it gets close to exam time. If you're watching this and it's a month out and you're just starting to study, that's okay. It's still doable. But ideally, you want to sit down about 6 months ahead of time, have a look at the general question types and exam strategies, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then use these to plan out how you're going to fit in your study and what you want to focus on. So you want to read widely from this 6-month mark in order to practice your comprehension and to build your vocabulary. Try to fit this into your daily life to make it a habit. So maybe read a news article on the train or a short story just before you go to sleep. And this reading is particularly important if you have an ESL background and you've not studied much English literature before. So the types of words and sentence structures that are used can be quite unusual and they're difficult for everyone. So starting to familiarize yourself and practicing this vocabulary from the 6-month mark is very important. Now, 3 months out from the exam, you want to start practice questions and build up to the point where you're doing these under timed conditions. Part of the difficulty with GAMSAT study from this 3-month mark is balancing your study with all of your other commitments. So if you're studying at uni at the same time, that 3-month timeline correlates quite well with the long uni breaks. So use that to your advantage and try to do as many full days of study as you can through the holidays. For instance, I did the March sitting and did the bulk of my study while I was home in December and January. And this lets you really just focus on the exam during that time. So when you go back to uni, you have a good foundation and you can focus on studying on the weekends or in your spare time. Now, if you're working full time, it might be good to try to fit your study in small blocks throughout the workday. So perhaps 15 minutes in the morning or on the train on the way to work, a few questions in your lunch break, and then some more study in the evening. And the weekends are going to become your more focused study days. 1 month out from the exam, try to start practicing full Section 1 papers under timed conditions. If you can aim for 2 to 3 of these per week, it'll put you in very good stead and you'll be confident going into the exam. So in general, the key takeaways from this timeline are that 3-month mark for focused study and a bit more time to familiarize yourself with the test and these types of passages, particularly if English is your second language. So in terms of study material, there's a fair bit available online, but above and beyond the most relevant and the best material is straight from the source. So that's ACER. There are 3 practice exams as well as practice question booklets that ACER sells. And these are going to be the most similar resources to the actual exam questions that you'll be able to find. Another excellent resource are the Des O'Neill's books. There's one for each GAMSAT section, and these books discuss strategies and have plenty of practice questions with full work answers. GAMSAT Science also offers several resources and practice questions on the website, as well as tutoring. Khan Academy has MCAT critical analysis questions, which are pretty applicable to the GAMSAT Section 1 questions. In terms of cartoons, the New York Times cartoons are often used in GAMSAT and are a great practice resource. And with vocabulary, there are Quizlet decks that are also very helpful. But in general, it's so important to read widely. This will help improve your comprehension skills, your reading speed, and your vocabulary more than anything else. So with some good preparation and leaving yourself enough time to practice, you'll be able to score as high as you possibly can. Good luck.